This episode contains mature themes and content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the Friction to Freedom podcast, where the mission is to support you as you tap into the best and highest expression of yourself. My name is JanetDThomas. Thank you very much for joining me for this episode today. In this podcast, we are focusing on one item that inner shifts can lead to external success. Remember that you are your own best authority, so take what you can use and leave the rest. So today's question has to do with, how can inner work help me create the life that I want? How are these two connected? Well, in my lived experience, I had very, very specific trauma issues that I could not shake. As a result of those issues, my inner critic was incessant. And it was so bad. It got to the point where it was so bad that I became really depressed. And so depressed throughout the years that I was actually diagnosed as being clinically depressed. And I was on medication. And here is a definition of depression. A definition of depression can be feeling powerless to make a change. I was so under the thumb of my incessant inner critic that reminded me again and again that I was no good. And I became so powerless to change it that I was just at its mercy until it almost took me out. I could not stand it anymore, and I was getting ready to stop my thinking permanently, if you know what I mean. And my ex-husband, my husband at the time, now one of my very best friends, convinced me that I needed to stay on the planet for the people who loved me. And that's when I realized that I needed to live this life. But if I was going to live, I needed to live a life that was worth living. So I rolled up my sleeves and I really got to work. Now, one thing that I really recognized at that point was that I was absolutely desperate. I was desperate to find something different that I could work with to help me heal, because the defining moment was nothing else was working. I continued to look outside of myself for validation, for acknowledgement, for love, for support. And although I did get love and acknowledgement and support, it did not change my incessant inner zip code that I was no good. No matter what happened, I kept going back to that place. Nothing externally was ever good enough. Nothing externally was good enough to help me shift my thinking and to feel better about myself. So what happened was I literally did hit rock bottom and I became desperate. Let me give you a definition of desperate. Desperate is feeling, showing, or involving a hopeless sense that a situation is so bad that it is impossible to deal with. It became so impossible for me to deal with it that I was desperate to find something new. And that's when I started shifting to the inner work, because I didn't have anywhere else to go. So what I'd like you to do right now is shake out your hands and shake out your body a little bit, because what that does, sometimes when we hear someone else's story, it can get us dysregulated because we can be empathic and compassionate towards other people. So shaking out kind of switches the nervous system to switch gears a little bit. So what we're doing is getting that out of your own body, because it's not your story. It's my story. Now, the next part of my story is basically just to share with you what I recognize now as to what happened. You see, with your nervous system, the mid part of the brain thrives on comfortability and predictability. The midbrain doesn't like any surprises. And that's why it can be hard to learn sometimes, because we like to be comfortable in there. And learning can be very uncomfortable. And we learn through fear or novelty. So the novelty part of the brain is in the front of the brain. And that's where I needed to actually go in order to try something new. So I needed to make sure that I felt that my body had comfort and safety and predictability, and that there were no threats to it, because that's when the midbrain kicks in. When you are feeling threatened, you can't learn anything because it's all about your body's preservation. So this is really an exercise when you want to learn something new and turning into the inside to do some inner work, which I have certainly found is the way out of my depression, out of my trauma, out of all of these things that were plaguing me. That's the way that I did it, through inner work. Now, while I was completely bombarded by my incessant inner critic, I could see, or I could envision, a future self. I could see my future self. And it was like I was on a bridge and I was looking across the bridge at my future self. And what I thought I wanted was, feelings of security and confidence and beauty and self-esteem and ambition that I was able to achieve. I saw my future self. I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And it was through my desperation, because I am very stubborn, it was through my own desperation that I was able to connect with my future self. So I want to give you some information today on the idea of how inner work can help you access your future self. This is one self-discovery tool that I want to share with you that I learned in my own desperation and my own breakdown, and then my subsequent breakthrough to look on the inside and learn how to reshape myself from the inside out. So I want to give you, there's just an analogy I want to give you. There is something called a switchback. Now, I might get this wrong, so bear with me, but from what I understand, in mountain hiking or in mountain biking, there's something called a switchback. And basically, a switchback is when you are ascending and climbing, and there's a technique to do it where you're spiraling to go up and you come back to the same point, but you're accelerating upwards. You're going upwards as you're circling back. I hope this is making some sense anyway. So I'm going to use the idea of the switchback when it comes to life. So what I learned how to do was to understand and decode some things. So in this decoding with this self-discovery tool, think about it this way. We have certain themes in our lives that repeat again and again. It's kind of like the switchback where we're coming into a circle, and then we come right back to that same place. And it's just going around and we come back, around, we come back. So let me give you an example. Here's an example, actually. Let's say that you meet a person, you really like them, you guys start seeing each other, and before you know it, the kind, pleasant person, fun, etc., that you met starts to become mean. They start getting mean. They get nasty. They blame you. They say it's your fault. And you believe them. But then you're in a relationship with them and you stay in that relationship for a couple years. And then you finally say, you know what? I just can't do it anymore. This is just brutal and the abuse is just not cool. So then you leave. Okay. You leave and you say, I'm out of that situation. And you start living your life again. And before you know it, you meet someone else. They're nice. They're kind. They seem to be really, compatible with you. And then you get into a relationship with them. And then they start to become mean. And then they start becoming, impatient with you and temper tantrums and things like that and blaming you for it. Sounds familiar? Coming full circle. And you think to yourself, I thought I handled this. But here's the thing. Let's say that you recognize that they're mean and they're not for you. And after 6 months, you leave. Now, you might be really upset with yourself. How could I have gotten myself into that situation again? The same thing. I'm not learning. I'm not growing. Here's the thing to understand. What you did is you may have come full circle again and had the same situation, but you left after 6 months instead of being in it for 2 years. And that's progress. That is something to be appreciative for within yourself. So the invitation here is we have life themes. It could be relationships, it could be health, it could be other things that we come back to again and again so that we can gauge our own growth, our own self-discovery through our growth. And we can see it that way if we're not going to judge ourselves, if we are going to give ourselves some self-compassion, which simply means that giving yourself the same encouragement and the same support that you would give to someone that you love, that you would give to a friend. You know how to speak to other people kindly and to support them and encourage them when they're down. This is all about learning how to do that for yourself. I'll give you a personal example, my lived experience. So I have had in my life a battle with my weight. I have had, I've been obese. I have gained and lost well over 1,000 pounds throughout the years. And I would gain weight and lose it and gain weight and lose it. And there came a time when I'd actually lost 100 pounds and kept it off for numerous years because I was healing my emotional eating. You see, from the time I was a little girl, I didn't think that I had the right to have a voice. So I kept silent on things that were really bothering me. But for comfort emotionally, what I would do is I would eat. And it was also something that I shared with my mom. So I had that connection there too. So the emotional eating became a habit for me. And as I started to heal myself emotionally, I got to the point where I wasn't eating as much to silence my emotions. And when I started to get a handle on my emotional eating, that's when I was able to lose weight and keep it off. Now, what happened was I got a lot of stress that happened during COVID and actually before COVID. My father, who was very, very healthy until he was in his early 80s, got sick and needed surgeries and other things. And I was helping as a part of his process, supporting him through this journey. That was very stressful. And COVID hit, he passed away. And then my mother, whose Alzheimer's got really bad, I was helping her as well, supporting her life, and she passed away. Well, needless to say, I was under a lot of stress, and I actually gained back half of that weight that I had lost. So I gained back 50 pounds or so. And what I would have done in the past is I would have beat myself up. It's a switchback. I come full circle again to a life theme of mine that I'm just dealing with again and again and again. This time it was different. And what was different about that is that I was happy and proud of myself for actually not going all the way back to gaining back the weight that I had lost, that I'd worked so hard to lose. I'm still 50 pounds down. And for me, that is a huge win. So I decided to look at that differently and with self-compassion. I was giving myself the encouragement and the support and speaking nicely to myself as if I were a friend. I would say that to a friend. So I learned how to say that to myself. So the question here is, how can inner work help me meet my future self? How will it help me achieve my goals? So there are 3 things that I want to share with respect to this. Number 1, decoding your life's experiences for self-discovery. Here's where I think that this can really work out well and what I learned how to do. Search for areas where you can practice giving your younger self a break. The younger version of yourself, when you are learning and growing, can revisit the same themes again and again to learn how to practice self-compassion. Understand that the themes that you revisit over and over again, when you meet them with self-compassion, can allow you to connect with your future self. You can get to your future self by showing self-compassion to a younger version of yourself. They're connected. That's how you learn how to decode these themes in your life. When you revisit things again and again, the opportunity is to be self-compassionate. Speak to your younger self as if you understand them and you are comforting them and you're understanding it. And the thing is, more self-compassion, the more you give yourself self-compassion, the more you talk to yourself kindly, as if you were talking to a friend, helps your younger self heal, and it helps you connect with your future self. Now, I am chatting about this with you based upon my own lived experience, okay? The opportunities to practice self-compassion, the more non-preferred experiences you have, the more things have really knocked you to your knees, gives you more of an opportunity to practice self-compassion. Idea number 3 with this: seek progress, not perfection. When you're doing a switchback and you handle something that you may have been stuck in for 2 years, you go back to it and it takes you 6 months to kind of get through it. That is progress, not perfection. Think about it this way. The universe by nature is always evolving. The universe is always evolving and growing and expanding. There's no ceiling, there's no limit to the growth and the expansion. So if the universe is expanding all the time, so are you. Because when you think of the idea of perfection, that implies that there is a ceiling and that there's nowhere else to go. And there is always something to learn. There is always something to grow with. There is always something new that you can understand about yourself. So I invite you to seek progress as opposed to perfection. You're never going to get there. Sorry. You're always growing. Give yourself a break. Allow it to be okay that you're not perfect. Perfectionism is pretty impossible. Progress, beating new goals, learning things, and you're getting through them more quickly. That's the idea. That's the intention. Okay. So when you decode your life's themes like that, that can gently guide you to inner clarity. The practice of self-compassion, treating your younger self with kindness or encouragement like you would with someone you love, brings your future self closer. Let me give you an example of this. Let's say you're in that 2-year relationship that you've ended, and you give yourself self-compassion about it. Allow yourself to understand that you have the right to grow and learn like everyone else. You're not going to be perfect, but you can learn and understand things. The more that you are self-compassionate, the more you can meet a better energetic match for yourself. You're no longer willing to accept subpar behavior from other people when it comes to yourself. And especially when you give yourself encouragement and support, your younger self, that self-esteem starts to grow from the inside. And then you change your outside based upon that. I hope that this is kind of making a connection here with how this functions. Inner work, inner shifts can lead to external success. Self-compassion, progress rather than perfection are the ways to go to help you cross that bridge to your future self. Now, here's what's interesting about it for me. I imagined what my future self would look like and feel like and be like. I didn't realize that decoding my life's themes would be a part of the thing that got me to being my future self, which is, I guess, now. But what had happened with that was that what I imagined my future self would be in the world physically, what I imagined it would be was actually more than I could have imagined, because I didn't understand how powerful this inner connection could be. I didn't understand how much inner confidence I would have in supporting myself and how that would manifest in my life. I didn't understand how I was able to meet myself based upon giving compassion to a younger version of myself. I didn't understand that my ambition and my achievements, my non-negotiable goals, I could get based upon this self-compassion and this self-confidence that I built from the inside out. As a result of this self-confidence, that was not a function of external success, is what helped me achieve my non-negotiable goals in my life. So when you know that you have non-negotiable goals, if you don't know what your goals are, the inner clarity can help you access them. And once you access those non-negotiable goals, and you've got some inner clarity and some self-confidence because you know how to be compassionate towards yourself, watch out, because you're going to be able to achieve things that you really may not have imagined that you could. That's part of it. Decoding these similar, predictable, familiar themes that you may revisit again and again, but understand that when you're progressing, it's an upward spiral. You're getting there. You're getting to the top of that mountain. And you can do that with self-compassion and patience, time, focus, and repetition. Once you get the gifts from those non-preferred experiences, once you learn how to embrace your younger self, who Think about it this way. Your younger self was always doing their best. They were doing their best with what they had at the time. Maybe you can give yourself that break. Maybe you can give that to yourself. You were only doing the best you could with what you had at the time. Give yourself a break. Just imagine giving yourself a break. Now, if you find it difficult to give yourself a break and your inner critic is continuing to be incessant and unforgiving, simply acknowledge that your inner critic, one of those voices in your head of many, is just the loudest, and it's allowed to be the loudest for now. But here's what you can do to disrupt that inner voice that is hyperly critical of yourself. Hyperly. I don't know if hyperly is an adjective, an adverb or not. The hypercritical voice in there. Think of it this way. You might not be able to silence it, but you can disrupt it. We talked about the tool of neutralization, where you simply describe the facts without judgment. When you neutralize something, you are disrupting the spin, the thinking about the fact that may be negative within yourself. So the neutralization is all about disrupting the inner critic from spinning out of control. All you're doing is noticing and observing just the facts. Just the fact. My inner critic is running wild in there. That's all it's doing. It doesn't mean you're bad or wrong or that you're never going to amount to anything. It simply means that your inner critic is running rampant. It's okay. It's okay. Observing things, just the facts. And if you're having a challenge doing that, why don't you try going outside if you have got grass near you? Put your feet in the grass. Look at the wind blowing through the trees. Watch how animals act. Look at the behavior of dogs or cats. These are facts. These are honest. These are just the facts. It's simply how nature functions. There's nothing there but truth. And when you do that, it can help ground you, help you recognize where the facts are, and that will allow you to practice being able to disconnect from the idea that you're bad or wrong or will never amount to anything that the inner critic may continue to let you think about. How does that sound? At any rate, thank you very much for being with me today. Being kind to your younger self helps you connect with your future self. Confident, meeting those goals, ambitious, happy, joyous, able to talk to yourself nicely. That's the promise. In this podcast, every episode, we are focusing on two things: neuroscience, the nervous system, and also self-discovery tools. In the next episode, I am going to add to this particular self-discovery tool and give you another one that has to do with helping to decode your life's themes. We're going to talk about decoding these things so that you can use this information practically in order to live the life that you want to live, living in the highest expression of yourself. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Feel free to leave me a comment or hit me up in social media, JanetDThomas, and also on my website at JanetDThomas.com. Remember, you have the ability to be kind to your younger self. The more you practice that with time, focus, and repetition, the better you're going to be at it, and the easier it's going to be to meet the future self that you dream of. Take good care, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you next time.